Hi everyone. It has been a whole ass while since I've done a video. I wanted to do a couple of quick updates about my collection since last time. The first is that I want to completely contradict something that I said in the Shin Hati review, which is that she can absolutely ride behind Sabine on the Howler. Like, it's perfect. I don't know if I wasn't trying hard enough that day or like what the issue was, but that skirt, that plastic skirt that was theoretically the problem, just moves right out of the way, sits on her hip. Look at how happy they are. Happy Pride Month, everybody. Thing two is that I bought this guy and I opened him without you. I'm sorry. I just want to let everybody know from a review perspective that if you're an opener like me, get used to seeing this guy lying on his ass because he does not stand up to save his life. I've done all the tricks. I drilled out his peg hole. I've sanded down the peg on this stand. The only thing I haven't done is gorilla glued him to this stand. And even then, I bet he's gonna fall over. So if you open this guy and you have a figure collection where action figures are in positions, try to come up with a scenario where he's just lying down a lot because that's what you're gonna get. The purpose of today's talk is to admit that until very recently, I don't know that I understood what the vintage collection actually is. So a little backstory, obviously I collected Star Wars figures when I was a kid, and by that I mean Kenner figures because I was an actual child back then, and transitioned into Power of the Force 2 when that relaunched in the 90s. Basically kept going with a couple of breaks ever since. And for me, as long as it was 3 3/4 inches tall, I just, stayed with the line and thought, this is the continued evolution. I don't think I really got what changed in 2018 when the 5-point of articulation lines were basically eliminated. I think it was actually 2019. I believe there was a line for, Resistance would have been 2019. And that was a great line, by the way. The Resistance toy line was great. And obviously it hasn't been completely articulated anyway because we still have the epic Galaxy of Heroes or whatever the hell they're called. But the primary 3 3/4 inch, the primary Star Wars line is now the Black Series, which are too big to fit in my display. And the secondary line for people like myself who've been collecting since we were kids is the vintage collection. And I don't think I got it until very recently. I was like, the vintage collection is just the continuation, right? This is just how they do 3 3/4 inch figures now. No, that ain't it at all. It's really right there in the name. It's like this niche of a niche of a niche of a sub-brand for people, again, like me, who didn't want to convert over to 6-inch figures and still want their toys to be yay big because all of their other toys are yay big. So that's all it is. But the problem with that is that the buying demographic looks like me, right? I'm gonna be 50 next year. I'm sure most of my compatriots in this hobby are a little bit older than that. And that, is why we've got so much focus on 1, the original trilogy, and 2, oddly, The Mandalorian, because The Mandalorian is made by guys who look like, if you Google Jon Favreau or Dave Filoni, they don't have the hair clips, but they look like me, right? So like The Mandalorian hit huge with this demographic because it was very original Star Wars focused. It was, Filoni's on the record of saying that, or maybe it was Favreau. One of the two of them is on the record of saying that the creative premise of The Mandalorian was, it was based on those days when we were kids playing with our Kenner figures. And you'd dump your box of Kenner figures or your neighbor's box of Kenner figures on the ground, and there'd be like, Hammerhead and a Bespin Guard and Boba Fett. You'd have like 2 completely miscellaneous characters and 1 cool one, and you just have to come up with a story, and that's what The Mandalorian is. This is all leading somewhere, I swear. Harrison Ford finger. Anywho, long story short, until very recently, I thought that the purpose of the vintage collection, albeit much, much slower, was to continue to represent Star Wars merchandise in the modern era. That it was supposed to be tie-in merchandise. This is, you think Lucas made his money because Star Wars was a successful movie at the box office? Heck no. He made his money because he understood that the licensing, that the tying in of merchandise was going to more than make up Lucas, this is here's an important historical note, toy note. George Lucas paid for the prequel trilogy, which again, he paid for out of his own money, right? He funded the prequel trilogy himself. He paid for the prequel trilogy with the license he struck with Hasbro before the prequel trilogy was made. He made a $400 million deal, which back in whenever that was, 97, 98, was a big deal, a lot of money, before he made the prequels or while he was making the prequels. And from that, the only reason I bring that up is from that moment, from a Lucas personal finance standpoint, the prequels were paid for. It didn't matter if they didn't make $1 at the box office. He'd already earned back his investment just on the licensing deal. So that's what I thought the Vintage Collection was. It was just the modern incarnation of an ongoing stream of licensed products that support Star Wars as an entertainment brand. That ain't what it is, right? It is, again, it's in the name. It's the Vintage Collection. It is a vintage style collection of toys that don't tie to the modern entertainment at all if they don't want to. It still doesn't explain why they went all in on the Acolyte. I'm sure there are particulars in the contract that I don't know about that require them to support certain parts of the new media in certain ways. But if they want to just ignore Skeleton Crew, which clearly they're going to do, or Andor, which is an inexplicable miss, they can do it. I mean, the reason I say Andor is an inexplicable miss is because, again, the cohort that I think that the Vintage Collection is marketed towards, which is graybeards like myself, we all love Andor. Like, we're obsessed with it. If they made an entire Vintage Collection line of Andor figures next week, we'd all buy 10. But, like, you know, Hasbro's just like, nah, you know, return to Tatooine. Return to Tatooine. Like, Steve from Hasbro just posted on his Instagram the other day about how much he's looking forward to 2027, the 50th anniversary of Star Wars, and what that's going to mean for Star Wars toys. And I know exactly what it's going to mean. And I'm just not going to be interested because I've been doing this for, at that point, 50 years. And I've got them all. Like, you can't release another version of Tatooine Luke for me. Like, how many of those could I possibly need? As people who have been watching the channel for a while might know, I have a skiff up there, a Tatooine skiff. It's called the Skiff of the Lukes. It's nothing but Lukes on that skiff. And I don't mean there's 6 guys on there. I mean there's like 19 guys on there, and it's nothing but Lukes. What I wanted to talk about today, as it came up when I opened the Geonosis War Room sets a few months ago, is that what I really miss about the golden era of 3 3/4 inch with Hasbro is the depth of the line. And this goes all the way back to the beginning. And again, yes, goes all the way back to that creative brief they mentioned for The Mandalorian, which was when I was a kid, one of the most exciting things, not just about Star Wars figures, but kind of about Star Wars. And many have said this elsewhere and probably more elegantly, so I'm not exactly reinventing the wheel here, but one of the most exciting things was that there was an action figure of Hammerhead. That if you were a weird miscellaneous character in the back of one scene or in one shot, you might still be an action figure. And the reason I say that that's important is that it kind of conveyed, without conveying, this idea that this entire world was extremely large. That all of these people that kind of float through shots and aren't necessarily the main characters, the Skywalkers, they have stories of their own, and they could participate in battle sequences or action scenes or whatever you wanted to do with your toys when you were a kid. That was a huge part of it. And again, kind of like leads to The Mandalorian, right? Like, yeah, we all had that. Like, for me, a lot of my Star Wars figures when I was a kid were hand-me-downs from my neighbor who, you know, they had 2 boys, a little bit older than me and my brother. And so we got a box one day of like, here's the stuff these guys are going into middle school. They don't play with this stuff anymore. Yeah, right. And you know, the box wasn't exactly full of like Luke's and Leia's. Like, there were a lot of guys in there that it was just like, well, B-wing pilot. What the hell am I gonna, I don't have a B-wing. What am I gonna do with this thing? You know, like, it was stuff like that. But you were a kid, you used your imagination. Star Wars is an imagination driven property. So you came up with a story, you came up with who this person was, why they were there, why they were fighting for the rebels, why they betrayed the rebels in some cases. You know, you invented this entire architecture, and that's what made it so much fun. And one of the reasons, therefore, that Power of the Force 2, when it launched in when it launched, it seemed a little bit nuts, right? Because they were all burly, and they only did the Star Wars characters, so like Leia, Chewie, and Han, and whatnot, and they were all roided up. Seemed nuts, but then very quickly, Hasbro was like, wait a minute, we're doing 3 3/4 inch action figures again. We can start to do stuff that we couldn't do in the original line. You know, we can start building this out. I don't think this was the first example of that, but it was probably the most impressive early example is, of course, the very first Darth Vader with removable helmet. This was 97, maybe 98. This was like, for a little while, the most coveted action figure in the world. They made a Darth Vader with a removable helmet. You know, like, it became a really, really big deal. So at long last, we arrive at the purpose of today's video, which is to highlight some figures that have come out over the years that I'm, one, agog that they made it into an action figure in the first place, and 2, I just love it because it's so weird and random, and it just builds out the power of the Force. No, of the line, right? Like it just makes this a rich, deep world of characters that, again, you know, I mean, like, look, the vintage collection will go for a Rando now and again. I'm sure we will see Arliel Shoes sooner or later because he's strongly tied to very core Star Wars products like the Cantina. But that thing where they just take a flyer on a character that fattens out the line in an interesting way, isn't a main character, secondary character, even a tertiary character, but is just there, that seems to have gone by the wayside. So I just wanted to highlight my favorites over all of these years, my favorite weird rando characters that Hasbro has done. Right around the release of Darth Vader with removable helmet, we also got this one. Now this is the very definition, not a particularly weird rando character, but I don't think any collectors that are younger than me would necessarily get how weird and amazing it was in I think it was 97, 98, that Hasbro did Aunt Beru, right? Like, this is the definition of not an action, emphasis on the action figure. She pours milk. She literally comes with the milk jug and the milk cup. Those are her accessories. And, you know, this is still a very, very good rendition of that character. She looks terrific. The color use is great. The sculpt is good. So when this came out, like they'd already done Owen, they kind of dipped their toes in the water with Owen they did a 3-pack the year prior where Owen's buying the droids. Why not couch your risk by including another Luke Skywalker action figure with your Owen? But then they did Beru to kind of complete it. And that was another thing that's kind of gone by the wayside, is like, if you had an Owen, Hasbro seemed to feel like they owed you a Beru. Like it would make sense that you would want those two characters together. You wouldn't want just one, you'd want both of them. So when Beru came out, I was as delighted as I've been in my entire toy collecting life, because that is so weird. The other thing that was true about this, I'm pretty sure, depends on when Mon Mothma came out. This was probably the second feminine character in the Star Wars line, right? Or thereabouts. Like prior to that, it was only Leia. I mean, there were a trillion Leias, which that's not nothing. Like the fact that Hasbro made so many Leia variants in the original, that Kenner made so many Leia variants is not nothing. But there are very few speaking roles for women in the original trilogy. Beru is one of them. So the fact that she got a figure was a really big deal. This is already, I can tell you, the longest video I'm ever gonna do. Figure 2, this one was in the Phantom Menace line. Now the Phantom Menace, again, for people who might be a little bit younger than me that weren't here for the toy release of the Phantom Menace, that experience was crazy. They were so sure, and they paid so much for the license, they were like, we're gonna flood the market with toys. Every single character from the Phantom Menace is gonna be a big deal. It was like the opposite of the, like if you're aware of the original Star Wars action figure crisis back in '77 when the movie was a huge hit and they didn't have any toys. And the mail-away kit, the early bird mail-away kit. This was the opposite of that. That was like, there is gonna be nobody not covered. So we get my next favorite, completely trivial character as an action figure, C.O. Bibble. This is nuts. Like, again, I love this era because they're like, give him a gun. He never uses a gun. He never even seems to suggest that he would know how to use a gun. But like, they're like, give him a gun. He's an action figure. So they did C.O. Bibble. I loved this figure when this came out. I was so excited. This was not in the initial 3 waves of Phantom Menace, but it followed pretty closely as I recall. And I still think it's, again, great sculpt, beautiful use of color on the purple. And you can pretend he went in and raided the palace with Padme if you'd like. You can put him with all of your other... I mean, Naboo is such a beautifully designed environment in Star Wars. The costumes, the art direction, everything is wonderful. So he looks really great hanging out with Royal Guards and with Captain Panaka. Yeah, great figure. Come Attack of the Clones, and we've already talked about that a little bit with the Geonosis War Room. I've mentioned this, but this guy was actually the reason I thought to do this video in the first place, which is Wat Tambbor. Now, you know, again, the line was deep enough for Attack of the Clones that they did the entire War Room eventually, but I believe this guy came out first. Back then, they weren't charging you double just for having a large piece of architecture to come with the figure. So yeah, he came with this weird console thing that's partially made out of Geonosian rock, and as many have pointed out in the comments of the Geonosis videos, his holographic rocket can be removed from here and plugged into the Geonosis War Room table if you're so inclined. And you know, the prequel era was kind of the hot gooey center of my collecting era, so I tried to do one today from each movie, and the one that I nominated for Revenge of the Sith was this dude, the Coruscant fire speeder pilot. Now, one thing I will say about him, he makes a great background character if you have like a Rebel flight deck display. He just looks like he should be there, even though he should not be there. He's got the right kind of vibe. This character, you don't even see his entire body in the movie. You see his head in one shot going like, oh, well, you're on fire, Anakin. And that's it. And this is so outside the pale of what Hasbro covers that I don't know what they were thinking when they did this. Also in the Revenge of the Sith era, although I didn't collect it till much later, I'd be remiss if I did not mention, they of course did George Lucas. This is the George Lucas cameo from Revenge of the Sith, where he plays Baron Papanoida, the Papa Nerd, at the opera. And he came in a 4-pack with his entire family because he sent his child to get massacred by Order 66, and I believe his 2 daughters are also, I think one of them's a senator and one of them's his aide or something like that. I don't recall. But yeah, you know, this is, where's the vintage collection George Lucas figure, Hasbro? You're never gonna do that. Or maybe they are. You know, they've been holding back whatever VC375 is, and it could very easily be a George Lucas figure. That would make sense, right? Like that would, since it's not Luke and it's not Ben, it would make sense. And the last one I want to mention, this is funny because when they released this, I actually decided to quit collecting for a while. I mean, I at that time I thought I was done for good, and then Disney bought Star Wars and there were new movies, and I was like, oh, I guess I'm back in. But when they released Gargan, and yes, I'm aware that she is a notorious peg warmer, but when they released this, I was like, I have everything I'm ever going to need. Like, look, I've mentioned in the past, like, there's the throne room, there's the sail barge. I've mentioned in the past, when I was a kid, the whole Jabba thing was my Star Wars environment. Like, I was just kind of obsessed with it. Return of the Jedi is my favorite movie. Like, I loved Jabba's palace. When they released Enslaved Leia in '97, that was one of those moments where it was like, oh, they're really going for it. They're really filling in the cracks of what a Star Wars line can cover. And they did a lot of Cantina aliens. They did a lot of Jabba's Palace goons. They did the entire band. Like, to this day, I don't have the entire band. I'm still missing the 2 drummers because I couldn't keep up with it. But when they released Gargan, I was like, I'm done. Like, I have it all. The 6-breasted dancer who kind of like sachets through a couple of shots. Beautiful that they did this, and genuinely one of my favorite figures and one of my favorite characters. Has never not been on my shelf since I bought her in, I believe, 2010 or 2011. She is one of the all-timers for me. And, you know, to those of you who left her on the pegs, you missed out. You lost. So to wrap things up here, I'd be remiss if I didn't say that I've also arrived at another maybe I'm done moment. I don't think that I am. I've suspended my Star Wars collecting enough times in the past to know that sooner or later something comes along where you're like, holy crap. I mean, the sail barge is a great example, right? Like, I mean, as soon as they announce that they're doing the Fondor or the TIE Avenger or, you know, anything that I really love from any of the Andor or Skeleton Crew or whatever, I'm obviously going to be back in. But looking ahead at the year, you know, I just pre-ordered that new Ben Kenobi, which is significant to me because Ben Kenobi was my first Power of the Force 2 figure. So basically, when I started collecting as an adult, it was Ben Kenobi. That was in '95. And now in 2025, 30 years later, almost to the day, if it ships when it's supposed to ship in November, I bought my Ben Kenobi in November. They're releasing a all new vintage collection Ben Kenobi, and I'm like, man, maybe that should just be the last one. Maybe that should be the last one I ever buy. Again, I doubt that's going to stick. But one of the other reasons that I am thinking this is really it is that I found my white whale of a Star Wars figure about a month ago. I've been looking for this guy for a while because he perfectly encapsulates what I mean about a weird random character from the back end of nowhere that nobody thinks about. I am, of course, referring to Uncle Gundy from Kenner in 1985. Not exactly a hard get, but I wanted to find him for a good price, and I didn't want him in a package because, you know, when they're this old and rare, as much as I love opening a package, when they're this old and rare, it feels like kind of like somebody out there who collects packaged. I'm doing them a disservice if I buy it packaged and rip it open when there are plenty of loose out there. So I finally found a loose one at Fourth Moon Collectibles here in Toronto. and I bought him, and I was like, maybe now he's not the last one, because I bought like 3 more action figures since I bought this one. But when I bought this, there was that same sense as with Gargan of being like, oh, I'm done. Like, I've got everything I want to get that exists right now. Now, again, the big caveat being next year they'll announce some HasLab that I'll be like, oh man, got it. But yeah, this guy is the perfect emblem of why I love collecting Star Wars figures. And if he were the last one, I'd be very, very happy. Thanks for watching what I am sure has been an unusually long video. I would love to hear what your what is your white whale? What is the one that you are still looking for? He or she or they are the cherry on top of your collection, the thing that you're like, if I get that, I'm good. That's not what a white whale is, by the way. A white whale is just a thing that you're obsessed with. So take it that way if you want. But 2, what's your favorite weird rando? Like, what's the figure in the line that makes the line exciting for you? You know, I guess it doesn't have to be a weird rando. If there's a figure in the line that makes the line exciting for you and it's Luke, brilliant. Tell me all about it and tell me why in the comments below. But I would love to hear, what is the one that they made where you looked at it and said, I cannot believe they're doing that. And it wasn't with horror, it was with delight. Can't wait to hear from you. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be back. I mean, as you've probably been able to work out, the videos are no longer dropping weekly because the toys aren't arriving weekly. Possibly because of tariffs, hard to tell. But, you know, next time I get something to unpackage in front of y'all, I will do so. And if I think of any other essay topics, which I guess this one was, I'll do that as well. I appreciate all of you. Keep on enjoying the hobby and being kind to one another, and I'll see you soon.